Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Imagine buying land specifically to avoid an HOA. Then a brand new HOA decides you're their problem anyway. First it's letters, then a security guy starts showing up at my barn like he owns the place. And one Saturday morning, he came back with someone else. So what do you do when strangers try to enforce rules that don't apply to you? This happened about 2 years ago, but it's taken until now for everything to fully resolve, so I can finally share the whole story. My wife and I own a 5-acre property in what used to be a rural area outside a mid-sized city. We bought it about 15 years ago specifically because it was outside city limits and had no HOA. The property came with an old barn that I've been slowly restoring, and I use it as a workshop for my hobby of restoring classic cars. I'm not running a business or anything, it's just something I enjoy doing in my spare time. Over the years, I've accumulated 3 project cars in various states of completion. About 8 years ago, a developer bought the farmland adjacent to our property and built one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions. You know the type, houses that all look identical, tiny yards, and of course an HOA with rules about everything from mailbox colors to lawn height. Our property predates their development by decades, and we're not part of their HOA. We made absolutely sure of that when they were doing the initial surveying and platting. Our property is separately deeded, has its own well and septic system, and is technically in the unincorporated county area while their subdivision incorporated into the city limits. For the first few years, everything was fine. We were good neighbors. We kept our property reasonably maintained, though admittedly not to HOA standards. Our grass might get a bit longer than the regulation 3 inches, and our barn definitely wasn't part of their aesthetic vision. But it was our property, and we had every right to use it as we saw fit. The problem started about 3 years ago when the HOA got a new board president. This guy was a retired middle manager type who apparently needed a new kingdom to rule. He immediately started expanding his interpretation of the HOA's authority. Within the subdivision, he was cracking down on every tiny violation. Basketball hoops in driveways, decorative flags, even one family's vegetable garden got cited as unapproved landscaping. Then he set his sights on us. It started with a letter, very official looking, on HOA letterhead, informing us that our property was in violation of community standards and we needed to take corrective action. The letter listed our violations: grass exceeding 3 inches in height, unapproved storage structure, our barn, which had been there since the 1960s, inoperable vehicles visible from the street, and about 6 other items. I'll admit, I laughed when I first read it. I wrote back a polite letter explaining that we weren't members of their HOA, our property predated their development, and they had no authority over our land. I included copies of our property deed and a survey map showing we were outside their boundaries. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. It stated that regardless of our HOA membership status, our property affected property values and community aesthetics in their development, and we were required to comply with their standards. They gave us 30 days to remediate all violations or face escalating enforcement actions. My wife was getting stressed about the whole situation. She's not confrontational by nature, and the idea of fighting with neighbors bothered her. But I was getting angry. This was our property, and we'd been there first. I decided to consult a lawyer. I found a real estate attorney who specialized in property rights disputes. She reviewed all the letters during a paid consultation and confirmed what I already knew. The HOA had no authority over our property. After I paid her retainer fee, she drafted and sent them a cease and desist letter, clearly explaining that any further harassment or attempts to enforce their rules on our property would result in legal action. Things escalated when the HOA hired a security company. I use the term company loosely. This was basically one guy with a pickup truck that had a magnetic sign on the side advertising his property patrol service. From what I gathered later, he did this kind of work for several HOAs in the area, driving around looking for violations and taking photos. His name was attached to some kind of property patrol service, something like Guardian Property Solutions, or some equally official sounding name. The HOA contracted him to drive through their development and cite violations. But apparently, his contract also included our property because he started showing up regularly. At first, it was just him driving slowly past our place taking pictures. Then he started pulling into our driveway. Then he started walking around our property. The first time I caught him walking around back near my barn, I went out and asked what he was doing. He told me he was conducting an inspection for the HOA. I informed him that he was trespassing and needed to leave immediately. He argued that he was just doing his job. I told him his job didn't include trespassing on private property that wasn't part of the HOA, and if he didn't leave, I'd call the sheriff. He left, but he kept coming back. Over the next few months, I probably chased him off my property a dozen times. Each time, I'd warn him about trespassing, and each time, he'd leave but eventually return. I called the non-emergency sheriff's line several times to report the trespassing. Each time, a deputy would come out, take a report, and sometimes they'd catch the security guy and warn him. But since he always left when confronted, and since trespassing in our county is usually just a citation for the first few offenses, nothing serious ever came of it. My lawyer sent another letter, this time to both the HOA and the security company, explicitly stating that they were trespassing and needed to cease immediately. We also sent a copy to the sheriff's office to create a paper trail. After that letter, there were about 3 weeks of peace. Then I got another letter from the HOA. This one demanded that I provide the HOA with a complete inventory of all items stored on my property visible from any public right-of-way. They cited some obscure county ordinance about property maintenance and said I had 30 days to comply. My lawyer looked at it and actually laughed when I showed it to her. She said the ordinance they cited actually required the county to maintain public records of such inventories, and any property owner could request to file one voluntarily. It was meant to help property owners establish ownership records for insurance purposes, not to give HOAs enforcement power. So I decided to do exactly what they asked. I created a detailed inventory, every single item visible from the road. I photographed my 3 cars from every conceivable angle. Front, back, sides, engine compartment, interior, trunk, undercarriage. I documented every piece of lumber stacked near the barn, every tool hanging on the outside wall, every old wheel rim, every bucket, every paint can visible through the barn windows. I included the make, model, serial number where applicable, estimated value, and purchase date for everything I could remember. The inventory came to 47 pages with photos. Then I filed it with the county clerk as a public record exactly as the ordinance specified. I paid the small filing fee, got an official stamp, and received a certified copy for my records. I sent a copy to the HOA with a note thanking them for bringing this valuable county service to my attention, and informing them that I had now created an official public record, establishing my legal right to store all of these items on my property. What they didn't realize was that by filing this inventory as a public record with the county, I had now created official documentation establishing my ownership and legal right to store all of these items on my property. The county clerk even entered it into the property records system, cross-referenced with my deed. I could tell this pissed them off because the security guy's visits became more frequent and more aggressive. He'd pull into my driveway and just sit there in his truck for 20 minutes taking pictures. He'd walk right up to my barn and peer in the windows. Once, my wife came home from work and found him in our backyard. That was when I decided to install security cameras. I put up 4 cameras covering the driveway, the barn, and the backyard. They were good cameras too, with night vision and motion detection that sent alerts to my phone. The cameras caught him trespassing 6 more times over the next month. Each time, I filed a report with the sheriff. I was building a documented pattern of harassment and trespassing. Then came the incident that finally brought everything to a head. It was a Saturday morning in early October. I'd been working in the barn on Friday night doing some work on my 1970 Chevelle SS. It's my pride and joy, a genuine SS with the 454 engine, though it had been sitting partially disassembled for about 2 years while I slowly rebuilt the transmission. I'd been working on it inside the barn, and I'd left the barn doors open overnight to let some paint fumes air out from the primer I'd sprayed on some parts. The car was sitting right there inside the barn, clearly visible through the open doors, but definitely inside the structure. I was inside the house having breakfast when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the security cameras. I pulled up the app and saw a pickup truck with a magnetic sign pulling into my driveway. It was the security guy, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him was a flatbed tow truck. I jumped up and headed outside. My heart was pounding. By the time I got to the driveway, the tow truck driver was already walking toward my barn and the security guy was pointing at my Chevelle. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted as I walked up. The security guy turned to me with this smug expression. "Mr. Thompson, I'm impounding this vehicle under HOA authority. It's in violation of regulations regarding unapproved storage structures and inoperable vehicles." "That's my car, in my barn, on my property," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You have no authority here." "The barn doors are open, which means the vehicle is visible from the street," he said, pulling out some paperwork. "According to HOA regulations, that constitutes improper storage. Additionally, this vehicle has been inoperable for over 60 days, which violates County Ordinance 47B regarding abandoned vehicles." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. First of all, this isn't an abandoned vehicle. I own it, I'm actively working on it, and I have documentation proving that. I gestured toward the house where my 47-page inventory was filed with the county. "Second, you're trespassing. Again. And now you're attempting to steal my property." The tow truck driver looked uncomfortable, but the security guy kept yelling at him to hurry up and finish the job. The driver said something about having a contract and needing authorization from whoever called him. The security guy showed him some paperwork from the HOA. I pulled out my phone and called 911. Yes, 911, not the non-emergency line. Someone was actively trying to steal my vehicle. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I also started recording video. I made sure to get clear footage of them hooking up my car, of the security guy's face, and of him stating he was authorized by the HOA. I also made sure the video showed the barn and the property clearly, establishing that we were on my private property and that my car was inside the barn structure, not just randomly parked outside. "I'm calling the sheriff," I announced loudly, making sure it was on the video recording. "You are attempting to steal my vehicle from my private property." The security guy just sneered. "I have full authorization from the HOA. This vehicle is being impounded according to community regulations. You'll be able to retrieve it once you've paid the impound fees and storage charges, and once you've brought your property into compliance with HOA standards." The tow truck driver had backed his flatbed into position and was starting to deploy the wheel lift. I positioned my own truck behind his tow truck to block him in. "If you hook up my car and try to leave with it, you'll be charged with grand theft auto, both of you." The driver stopped what he was doing and radioed his dispatch to explain the situation. I could hear a woman's voice on the radio but couldn't make out what she was saying. The driver looked increasingly nervous. The security guy, however, wasn't backing down. He kept insisting he had the authority. He showed me a document that the HOA had given him, which was basically just a letter on HOA letterhead saying he was authorized to enforce HOA regulations and remove vehicles in violation of those regulations. It even had a gold seal on it to make it look official. "This document has no legal standing on my property," I told him, still recording everything. "You are not law enforcement. You have no legal authority to take my vehicle. This is theft." My wife had been watching from the house window. She came out after hearing the commotion, shaking from adrenaline. She'd been terrified they were going to get away with taking my car before the deputies arrived. She stood next to me, and I handed her my phone to keep recording while I went to physically block access to the barn. We stood there in this tense standoff for about 15 minutes. The security guy kept arguing. The tow truck driver kept looking nervous and talking on his radio. I kept telling them both they were committing crimes. My wife kept recording everything. Finally, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. They pulled into my driveway with lights flashing, and immediately the whole dynamic changed. I quickly explained the situation to the deputies. I showed them the cease and desist letters from my attorney. I showed them the previous trespassing reports I'd filed. I showed them the video I'd just recorded of the security guy explicitly stating he was there to take my car. I showed them the HOA's authorization letter, which they examined and basically laughed at. One deputy went to talk to the security guy and the tow truck driver, while the other took my statement. My wife corroborated everything, and I told him we had the whole thing on our security cameras as well, plus what we just recorded on my phone. After about 20 minutes of the deputies talking to everyone and examining documents, they came back to me. "Sir, you're right. This is attempted theft. They have no legal authority to remove your vehicle from your property." They arrested the security guy right there. Handcuffs and everything. They cited him for criminal trespassing and attempted grand theft. The tow truck driver wasn't arrested, but he was told that his company could face charges if they didn't cease and desist immediately. The driver couldn't unhook fast enough. He practically peeled out of my driveway. The deputy explained to me that because my car was valued over the threshold for grand theft in our state, I documented its value at $35,000 in my county inventory filing, and because the security guy was actively in the process of removing it from my property without permission, the prosecutor could charge it as attempted grand theft rather than just theft or trespassing. The fact that he'd been warned multiple times before and had been explicitly told by my attorney to stay off my property made it even worse for him. As they were putting the security guy in the patrol car, he was screaming about how the HOA had authorized this, how he was just doing his job, how I couldn't do this to him. The deputy told him he could explain it all to the judge. After they left, I went back inside and immediately called my lawyer. She was absolutely delighted. This was exactly the kind of clear-cut case she'd been hoping for. We now had documented evidence of the HOA directing someone to commit crimes against my property. Within a week, we filed a lawsuit against both the HOA and the security company. We sued for harassment, trespassing, attempted theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a few other things my lawyer threw in there. We also filed for a permanent injunction against the HOA, preventing them from any further contact with us or attempts to enforce their rules on our property. The security guy was charged with attempted grand theft and criminal trespassing. The prosecutor told me later that in our state, once someone has physical control of the vehicle and is preparing to remove it from the property, it can be charged as either attempted theft or completed theft, depending on the circumstances and the prosecutor's discretion. Because my car was being actively hooked to the tow truck and they were preparing to drive away when the deputies arrived, it was right on the line. The security guy actually got somewhat lucky with just the attempted charge rather than completed grand theft. We had to wait for the criminal case to resolve before the civil lawsuit could move forward properly. The criminal case took about 4 months from arrest to his guilty plea. The security guy ended up pleading guilty to attempted grand theft and trespassing. He got a suspended sentence, probation, a hefty fine, and had to surrender his business license. Turns out, attempting to steal someone's car is bad for your property security business. Who knew? During the criminal proceedings, it came out that the HOA board president had explicitly told him to take my car. There were emails, lots of emails. The security guy's lawyer tried to use it as a defense. I was just following orders. But that doesn't work when the orders are to commit crimes. After the criminal case resolved, our civil lawsuit kicked into high gear. The HOA's insurance company got involved at this point. Once they saw the evidence, the videos, the documented pattern of harassment, the emails showing the board president had ordered the theft, the criminal conviction, they apparently told the HOA that they were on their own for this one. The insurance policy didn't cover intentional criminal acts directed by the board. The HOA board president tried to argue that he'd just told the security guy to deal with my vehicle, not to steal it. But the emails were pretty damning. One literally said, "I don't care what you have to do. I want that eyesore removed from sight. Get a tow truck if you have to." Faced with overwhelming evidence and no insurance coverage, the HOA settled. The settlement was substantial. I can't disclose the exact amount due to a confidentiality clause. But let's just say it was enough to fully restore all 3 of my project cars and still have plenty left over. More importantly, we got our permanent injunction. The HOA is legally prohibited from contacting us, entering our property, or attempting to enforce any rules on our land. The injunction is recorded with the county and runs with the land, meaning it applies to any future HOA boards, not just the current one. The HOA also had to issue a formal written apology, and they had to send a letter to every homeowner in their development explaining what had happened and explicitly stating that our property was not subject to HOA rules. That last part was my wife's idea, and honestly, it might have been the most satisfying part. Every single resident of that subdivision now knows that the HOA tried to steal my car and got sued into oblivion for it. The HOA board president resigned in disgrace. So did 2 other board members who had been involved in the decision to target my property. The new board president came to our door about a month after everything settled. Alone, polite, and visibly uncomfortable. He apologized for what had happened and assured us the new board had no intention of bothering us ever again. I appreciated the gesture. But I also made it clear that the injunction was staying exactly where it was. My wife sleeps better now. That might sound small, but it is not. For months, she had been stressed every time a strange truck slowed near the driveway or pulled onto our road. Now the cameras mostly catch deer, raccoons, delivery drivers, and the occasional neighborhood cat that seems to think it owns the place. I finished restoring the Chevelle with part of the settlement money. It is beautiful now. Proper SS stripes, original color scheme, and that 454 engine running the way it should. I take it to local car shows sometimes, and the irony is not lost on me that a few people from the HOA subdivision have come over to compliment it. Some of them even apologized for what their board put us through. The barn is still standing too. Still old, still mine, still unapproved by nobody who matters. I'm currently working on project car number 4, a 1968 Mustang Fastback I picked up after the settlement. It sits inside the same barn, on the same property, under the same roof the HOA tried to treat like a violation. The difference now is that nobody comes up my driveway with orange stickers anymore. Looking back, the inventory request was the funniest part. They thought they were forcing me to document violations. Instead, they pushed me into creating an official county record proving what I owned, where it was stored, and what it was worth. When their security guy tried to tow my Chevelle, that record helped turn the whole thing into a serious legal problem for them. They wanted enforcement of their rules. They got enforcement of actual laws instead. The cameras, the reports, the certified letters, the county inventory, all of it mattered. Without documentation, it would have been my word against theirs. With documentation, it became a paper trail they could not explain away. I still live on my property. My barn is still standing. My project cars are still in various states of restoration, and the HOA has no power over any of it. That is exactly how it should be. The next one is a malicious compliance story. My 4-year-old son can be a bit of a pest, and today was an absolute masterclass. He woke up and apparently decided that rage was going to be the answer to everything. That began a very long day of working on my patience. I am not sure if this technically qualifies as malicious compliance, but he is constantly testing our rules and looking for loopholes. I will skip the usual everyday chaos and go straight to the end of the day. Keep in mind that by this point, I was no longer trying to be the best parent in the world. I was mostly just trying to survive until bedtime. The first incident happened after dinner. We had burgers, and afterward he got a snack and a glass of milk. I told him that if he wanted anything else, it had to be fruit from the fruit bowl. He then proceeded to ask for yogurt, cheese, pasta, more milk, leftovers, and basically everything else in the fridge. I did not want to leave him hungry, but I figured that if he was truly hungry, he would accept some fruit, and then we could reassess from there. So I repeated that he was no longer allowed to eat any food from the fridge. A few minutes later, I started hearing strange crunching noises coming from the living room. I went to investigate. My son looked me directly in the eye and started munching on a piece of cat food. "This does not come from the fridge," he said, then started laughing. Defeated, I offered him something else to eat, but as I suspected, he was not actually hungry. At least that sped up the toothbrushing process for the evening. The second incident happened right before bedtime. I love him dearly, but it had been a long day, and I was looking forward to spending a little bit of quiet time with my newborn after running around with my 4-year-old all day. The last thing before bed was supposed to be a quick pre-bedtime bathroom trip. Instead, it turned into an argument about which bathroom he wanted to use. He changed his mind about 30 times before I finally said, "I really do not care where you pee, just go pee." That was the wrong choice of words. I went to his room to pick out a book and turn off the lights. Then he called from the bathroom, "Daddy!" I walked into the bathroom and could not see him at first. It took me a second to realize he was standing in the bathtub. Confused, I asked what he needed. His left foot was a little damp, and he wanted help cleaning it. Let's just say the towel went straight into the washing machine, and we did not need to flush the toilet. There was not much of a fallout. I mostly just laughed a lot and learned that from now on I need to use much more precise language. The next one is an entitled people story. I am aware that there are several similar stories involving entitled family members wanting houses they have no claim to. But I guess this kind of thing really does happen, and it is no picnic when it does. I became a homeowner some time ago because a friend's grandfather was moving to Florida, and his house was available. I knew the old man well. Rest in peace to him, because he passed away a few months later from a sudden stroke. Anyway, he offered the house and property to me for $200,000. I practically ran to the bank to apply for the loan. The house is a manufactured home from the 80s, but it had been remodeled repeatedly by the previous owner and also had a separate garage building. The home and property could have gone for more, but he offered it to me because he knew I would take care of it. I had $30,000 saved, which made a good down payment, and I was happy to leave my apartment. I had already wanted to move after what my cheating ex did, but that is a story for another time. As for my brother, he went completely off the rails when he found out I bought a house. For the past decade, he has had a repeated habit of copying me, but this was different. There was no way he could copy buying a house with his terrible credit and inconsistent income. He actually got into an argument with me, saying I had only bought the house to make him look bad by doing something he could not do. No, I just wanted a house, and the price was too good to refuse. Then he told me I should have turned it down, though he had no good reason why. I could practically see his screws getting looser with every ridiculous excuse he gave for why I should not have bought it. I pointed out that all of his excuses were really just because I had done something he currently could not do. Buying the house had nothing to do with him. I simply wanted to be a homeowner for the security and extra space. I finally did not have to store my camper at my parents' house anymore, and I had a garage where I could store things and tinker. His copying had been going on for years. I bought a camping cot, so he bought a camping cot. I went to the gym, so he went to the gym. I bought good alcohol, so he bought good alcohol, or stole mine. I bought a new television, so he bought a new television. I bought a truck, so he bought a truck. I bought a camper, so he bought a camper. I bought a used portable DVD player, so he bought one too. I went camping in a specific place, and he went camping in that same specific place. Then I bought a house, and his brain basically hit a system error. He also acted like a complete child toward me when he built his weird mini-RAM project. He actually confronted me and said it was cooler than my boring Tundra because it was original. I swear, he made some of the dumbest modifications to that vehicle, including putting twist studs in the suspension coils to raise the ride height. After weeks of openly fuming about me being a homeowner, my brother suddenly acted like he had another brilliant idea. He wanted to move in with me. I laughed at him. Then he started demanding that I rent one of my rooms to him for only $200 a month, utilities included, because according to him, he should not have to pay more than that since we are family. He completely lost it when I said absolutely not. Then he got our parents involved again. This time they actually sided with him at first, though it was mainly our mother. She and my brother showed up demanding that I let him move in. My brother had a smug grin on his face, and I could tell he thought he was finally getting his way thanks to Mommy Dearest. I told both of them no. My mother cried that I was using foul language toward her and being cruel when I had the space now. I called my dad and he told my mom that he had warned her I would not agree to it and that she needed to leave me alone. My mom whined that my brother was living out of his camper next to a shabby house where he was renting space. I told her that was not my problem to fix. My brother had proven countless times that he could not be trusted. At that point he was fuming so hard that his face was red and veins were popping out. My mom tried one more time to convince me with tears, and that just made me angrier. I went on a rant. I told them that my brother could not buy a house, so now he wanted to invade mine. I said I refused to ever live with him again. I would sooner live in the woods without electricity than live with him. He is intentionally irritating, and if I had him as a roommate, I knew he would steal my alcohol, take my belongings, and invade my privacy non-stop. It was not happening, no matter how many tears my mother tried to use on me. After that, my mom broke down and finally admitted she was not going to convince me. She had to take my brother by the hand and leave because he initially refused to go and kept begging her to turn back and make me let him move in. That was when I yelled after him that it was funny he had called me a mama's boy before, because now he had become exactly that. I also reminded him that this was just like the time he tried to get our mother to make me trade vehicles with him because he felt ashamed to be driving a minivan. He yanked away from our mom and told me to go screw myself and the horse I rode in on. I laughed and pointed out that I had not ridden in on anything because I was already home, but his spray-painted horse was waiting for him in the driveway. He lost it again and looked like his head was going to explode, but Mom got in front of him and told him to just go. Then he drove off in his rattling Silverado without her, even though he had been the one to drive her there, so I had to take her home. While driving her home, I made things very clear. I told her exactly why I could never trust my brother again and that his life was not my burden to carry. I also told her how little he had offered to pay in rent, which he had conveniently not mentioned to her. Later, I rented that same room to one of my best friends for $600 a month, plus utilities. The other 2 rooms are my bedroom and a home office. There is also an extra room in the separate garage, so my mother tried to convince me to let my brother live in the garage instead. There was enough room in the storage area for a bedroom. Again, I said absolutely not. That space has since been turned into another rented room for a friend after a bit of a plywood remodel. Yes, I did rent both the spare bedroom and the garage room to friends partly out of spite, but I was not letting my brother live with me in any capacity. My brother later had a complete meltdown in front of our parents about how he was the older brother and should have been the one to own a house first. He said he was supposed to be successful, and I was supposed to be the big loser in his shadow. Our dad poked him with his cane and told him that was not how life worked, and they got into a big argument. Eventually, our parents told him to get out and not come back until he had cooled off and learned that he was being a pointlessly jealous jerk. The next part of the story is where my brother did the dumbest thing of all. Edit. I came home late to more than 600 comments, with more still coming in. There are far too many for me to answer, so I will clear some things up here. Yes, I am no contact with my brother, and he is no contact with the rest of the family as well. I have cameras inside and outside my home, and I have a dash cam too. My brother knows this and has stayed away since he left town. Some people have called me an asshole. I am not going to argue with that because it is true. I am not exactly the nicest guy, but have someone like my brother in your life and see how cheerful you turn out. Some people mentioned having siblings just like my brother. Sadly, I know very well that people like him are increasingly common these days. My dad has said several times that my brother probably would have ended up dead in an alley if he had lived here 50 years ago with the way he behaves. As for our ages, I am 30 and my brother is 32. I have not given my parents a spare key to my house. One key is with a friend and another is very cleverly hidden. My house is a manufactured home, but it is not in a trailer park. It has been significantly modified with new siding and a new roof, and it has a separate garage building. The previous owner was a former general contractor who loved to build and repair. And yes, I do have good insurance. I keep seeing comments about a clock radio. I do not understand the reference, but I do own a digital alarm clock with a built-in CD player. It currently plays Tina Turner's Proud Mary to wake me up. My brother and I were raised pretty evenly. He was always a jerk, but he became a full-blown asshole after moving out. Our mother did not favor him in general. She chewed him out plenty and did not normally side with his stupidity. She just wanted him to live somewhere better than in a camper next to a house full of potheads. To clarify, my brother willingly moved into that camper. He had been renting half a room in that house full of potheads, then convinced the landlord to let him live in his camper on the property for the same price instead. He bragged about that camper a lot. It even has a full gaming setup with a PlayStation. He only wanted to invade my house to annoy me and make his cost of living even lower. He also does not like camping nearly as much as I do. He mainly liked irritating me by following me. He loved making me miserable. In fact, he felt entitled to make me miserable. That is the kind of person he is. Do I have a restraining order against my brother? No, not really. I just did not bother, because even if I did, it would probably only last for about a year. And if my brother were truly determined, something like that would not stop him anyway. Anyway, thank you for watching.